Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and to come and share with you some of the things that I can tell you about being a magi, sometimes called wise men, but we were actually magi. And there's a lot of misconceptions of what happened, and this passage of scripture from this morning, there are few and far. It's very difficult to find scriptures that are so widely interpreted and so debated about the details of them, and so uncertain of some of the details. And so I'm not here to tell you the exact details of who's right and what one of the little arguments. I'm here to tell you more of the importance of why we were there, when we were there, what it all meant. And so it's more of what God has to say about it rather than what are the exact chronological details. And because I'm sure you go around and you see nativity scenes, and there's always the three wise men, or you hear the song, "We Three Kings" of Orient are. And you see there the three of our wise men there, and our gifts that we presented. But really, when scholars debate, biblical scholars debate, there's not even a consensus of, were there three wise men? Were there more? Were there less? How many of them are there? Were they really kings? The word that was used is magi. We were magi. You recognize that word, and that's where you get your word magic in society. It's used in biblical times and other places with sorcerers. Simon the sorcerer, who Paul had to say, "In the name of Jesus Christ, come out of him." And so, there we were, three magi from the east. We weren't from God's chosen people in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land, Israel. We weren't from there. We were from pagan lands to the east of there. The east always symbolized the anti-Christian, the non-godly, the pagan world. We came from the pagan world. But we weren't the first to come from the pagan world. Abraham was chosen by God and called from there to a holy land. So our journey was much like that of Abraham. From the evilness, anti-godly. As magi, we were scholars. Never mind whether or not we were kings or not. But we were astrologers. We knew that there was something beyond what happened in earth, something beyond we're just born, we live, and we die. There's something more out there. But we didn't know it was God. In fact, we thought it was something other than God. We thought the stars had the answers. We thought if we figured out what was happening above, that would be the answers to what we didn't understand or didn't know about here on earth. And so isn't it amazing that God would take an anti-godly, anti-Christian practice and sorcery, where you get witchcraft or Scientology, and use that to lead us to Him. And so, we weren't there Christmas morning. Yes, the manger scenes all show us there. You should keep doing that, and to kind of that's a good way to remember what we did and why we did it. But we didn't show up on Christmas morning. We saw the star in the east, and we had to journey. We didn't get in our cars, our sport utility vehicles, our trucks, our camels. We walked and rode our camels, and we had to come all that way from the east. And if you'll remember, King Herod was worried about this baby Jesus that would be the king that he didn't want to have to share his kingdom with, and he was going to kill him. And so we had to tell him that the star had been there 2 years ago. So by the time that we got there, Jesus was a couple years old. And it's debated whether we got there at 2 years, a little before 2 years, somewhere between 0 and 2 years. But what is certain is we weren't there Christmas morning. The shepherds were. We had a message 3 weeks ago about the shepherds, the normal people, were the ones that God shared his news with first. And so by the time we get there, about a couple of years later, the shepherds have already gone around telling the glory that they've seen of Jesus, of God coming to us. Emmanuel, God with us, born to walk among us, born to be one of us humans, one of us people. And so it was 2 years when we came. And we knew that of the prophecy that there was going to be a king. We certainly weren't looking for this little baby in straw. We thought he would be born in royalty. We bring our gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And frankly, we didn't know the deeper meaning that God had with them that was shared in the children's message this morning. It was more of a cultural custom of a king being born in a foreign land to go and to always bring gifts. If you know of people today that when they'll get to someone's house, they'll always bring something, usually food. It's an eating culture nowadays. So for us, it was more common to bring something from our land. And frankincense and myrrh were specific to our areas in the east. You didn't really have them in Jerusalem and all of Israel, Judea, the Holy Land. They had to import that stuff. And so we thought it was the gold. We were rich. We had lots of gold. We share our gold. But the frankincense and the myrrh, we didn't realize had such bigger meaning of the frankincense or incense that was burned in the altar to have a pleasing aroma to God always in his church. And myrrh that would symbolize the death in Jesus Christ, preparing him for his death and ultimately his resurrection. What we really got out of it was salvation experience. We didn't know God. We didn't know things about God. We just knew that there was going to be a king coming. And so as I mentioned, we expected to see somebody, more like a baby Solomon born in a palace. And we kind of we're really surprised to find a humble little baby. And so it led us to understanding who God is, his love for us, his plan of salvation for us ultimately. And so, really, very humbling to realize that as these very smart men who have it all figured out, knowing the signs from above and knowing what it means and being able to share it with people and to do great things through our magi powers, that we were more of a way that God connected his perfect kingdom, his perfect love, his holiness, his sin-freeness with us sinners who really thought we knew everything, but really were going the wrong way. So isn't it amazing that God would take the mechanism of studying astrology, and hopefully you're not too big into horoscopes, and I know that still exists nowadays, to try to understand things from the stars, but so God to use that billboard of that star. And it's interesting looking at some of the people who debate, biblical scholars that debate, what was that star? And when was it? And was it this constellation, when these stars lined up and came together for a while, and was it at 2 BC or 4 BC or 0 BC, right when we started? Everybody has a theory. And really, when you look at them, all of them kind of make a little bit of sense, but don't really have it all together. And there's so much like God to just be able to explain most of it, but yet, with human understanding, there's always something that doesn't quite understand all of it. So God requires a little faith. And reminded of Hebrews 11:6, and says, without faith it's impossible to please God. And so, as someone who studied the astrology and knew the stars and all these things, especially in ancient times, we didn't have quite as much knowledge of the whole solar system and universe as we do now. But even then, we didn't know all those details. We just knew that there was going to be a star, and when we saw it, we knew what it meant. We were expecting a political king. We didn't go to Bethlehem to the manger. We didn't go to Nazareth where Jesus lived as a child. We went to Jerusalem. That was the capital. Where's the king here? King Herod. Tell us where this new king is. He's probably related to you. Oh, he's not related to you. And God even warned us that King Herod was going to try to kill the baby Jesus. And that's why we returned a different way and didn't go back and tell him where we found him. What a corrupt society. What a corrupt world. A world that so much needs us. A God of love, a God of salvation, a God giving salvation and forgiveness. What a life-changing event for us. Going from trying to figure out everything on our own, figuring out how to do things, being well known as people who could do the best of things, had answers when everybody else didn't have answers, to what we really need is God. You know, what we really don't have it all together, and really when we think we have it all together, we're going the wrong direction usually. And so a couple thousand years later, it's been a bumpy ride for humanity. There's been ups and downs, rise of nations, falls of nations, rising of kingdoms, falling of kingdoms. And it really is nice to see that God will use difficult times to bring his people that have gone astray back to him. And it really is those times when we really think we have it all together, when we really need to fall flat on our back to look up and say, okay, God, what do you want to say to us? What do we need to do differently? Okay. And that's when times go better again for a while. Really, we almost should be in the Faith Hall of Fame in Hebrews 11. You think of Rahab, the prostitute who helped the spies and the Israelite spies in Jericho. Because we made that about turnaround face from anti-godly to providing the link from God's perfect love and salvation to us sinners that really needed it. So it's been a pleasure to be here this morning with you to share what we, normal people who needed God, really, what our role really was and what it was really like for us. May God add his blessings to the message shared from Wiseman this morning. So really, isn't it like our life? Don't we have those times when we think we have it all together and we figure things out and we just stick our chest out and go straight ahead, and then we realize that when our plan goes wrong or we didn't calculate something in, that God is still there for us.